Please, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. His voice cracked as it echoed through the convenience store. Shoes screeched against tile. A basket hit the floor and skidded under a shelf. Heads turned. Someone shouted. Someone else froze. He ran. Not toward the exit, not toward safety, but in panic circles, like an animal that didn't understand where the walls were anymore. Please. I didn't mean to. The words kept spilling out of him, as if apology alone could rewind time. And then, cut. Because stories like this don't start where people think they do. They don't start with alarms or shouting or hands raised in surrender. They start years earlier, in small rooms, with quiet decisions no one applauds. His name was Adewale. Everyone called him Whale. He wasn't a bad kid. Teachers said he was gentle. Friends said he listened more than he spoke. He laughed softly, like he didn't want to take up too much space in the world. At 19, his life still looked open-ended. School during the day, a part-time job on weekends, plans that hadn't hardened yet. Then his mother got sick. Not suddenly, not dramatically. It crept in through forgetfulness, missed appointments, confusion over names she'd said 1,000 times before. Doctors spoke carefully, as if softer words could soften reality. They suggested options, facilities, care homes, professional supervision. Whale nodded politely through those conversations and rejected every single one of them the moment he stepped outside. He had grown up watching his mother sacrifice everything quietly. Long hours, tired eyes, food skipped so he could eat, love delivered without speeches. He couldn't imagine repaying that by leaving her with strangers. So he made a decision that felt noble and terrifying at the same time. He dropped out of school. At first, he told himself it was temporary, just a break, a pause until things stabilized. He packed his notebooks away carefully, as if he'd be back any day now. But days turned into routines. Mornings were about medication. Afternoons were about meals she sometimes forgot she'd eaten. Nights were about sitting nearby, pretending not to notice when she stared at the wall too long. Money disappeared faster than time. Savings went first, then possessions, then pride. Whale plied everywhere. Warehouses, grocery stores, gas stations, overnight cleaning shifts. He tailored resumes. He waited in uncomfortable chairs. He smiled through interviews where managers glanced at the clock more than his face. Sorry, we're fully staffed. We'll call you. You don't have the experience we're looking for. Weeks passed, then months. Bills didn't care that he was trying. Notices arrived with red lettering and polite threats. He learned how to stretch food, how to skip meals without feeling dizzy, how to reassure his mother without lying too much. He kept one promise sacred. She is not going to care home. He'd visited those places before. The smell, the silence, the way people waited, always waiting for someone who didn't come often enough. So when the math stopped adding up, Whale did something he never thought he would. The first time, it barely felt real. He stood in a store aisle holding something small, necessary, something his mother needed more than he did. His hands shook, not with excitement, but with calculation. He looked around. No one noticed. He slipped it into his jacket and walked out. The doors opened like nothing had happened. Outside, he stopped walking and stood still, heart pounding, waiting for someone to grab him. No one did. He told himself it was survival. He told himself it was temporary. He told himself he'd stop the moment he got a job. The second time was faster. The third didn't make his heart race at all. The store was familiar. Bright lights, predictable layout. Cameras everywhere, but cameras were just objects unless someone decided to care. It became routine. He never took anything flashy. Never took more than he needed. Food, toiletries, medication-related items. Things that made the apartment feel less fragile. At home, nothing changed. He cooked. He cleaned. He helped his mother to bed. When she asked how he was managing, he smiled and said, "We're okay." Every lie felt heavier than the last. Months passed. What Whale didn't know was that security footage doesn't forget. It waits. It collects patterns quietly. Faces that appear once are ignored. Faces that return again and again are remembered. He also didn't know that on one ordinary day, routines would collide. That morning, his mother was worse, disoriented, frightened by shadows. He stayed longer than planned, holding her hand until her breathing slowed. By the time he left, he was late. Late meant rushed. Rush meant mistakes. The convenience store near the bus stop was supposed to be quick. In and out, just enough to get through the week. The moment he stepped inside, something felt wrong. Not obvious, just heavier. A pause that lasted half a second too long. A glance that didn't look away. A sense that the air had shifted. He tried to ignore it. He moved through the aisles the way he always did. Calm, unremarkable, invisible, but invisibility is fragile. At the counter, his hands shook. Not enough to draw attention, just enough to betray him. Somewhere behind him, a voice changed tone. Someone noticed. And suddenly, the store didn't feel like a place anymore. It felt like a trap. That's when the shouting began. Please, I'm sorry. Whale ran not because he thought he'd escape, but because panic doesn't ask permission. He ran because standing still felt worse. He ran because fear had finally caught up to him. Shells blurred. Sounds overlapped. His apology became a loop, spilling out louder each time. He wasn't running from the store. He was running from everything that had led him there. And just before the moment that would change his life forever, before consequences arrived in a form he never imagined, the footage cuts. The shouting didn't stop when Whale fell. It changed. The echo inside the convenience store fractured into overlapping sounds, footsteps, commands, a sharp electronic crack, then chaos folding on itself. Someone screamed. Someone dropped to the floor. Somewhere, glass rattled as if the building itself had flinched. Whale hit the ground hard. Pain exploded through his arm, hot and immediate, stealing his breath. For a second, he thought he was dying. Not in the dramatic way people imagine, no final speech. No clarity, just shock, confusion, and a terrifying sense that his body had stopped listening to him. He tried to move. His legs didn't answer right away. Hands pressed him down. Voices shouted orders he barely understood. The ceiling lights blurred into white streaks as his vision tunneled. He kept saying it. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Not because he thought it would save him now, but because it was the only sentence his brain could still find. When the paramedics arrived, everything slowed again. They cut his sleeve open. Blood soaked the fabric. One of them pressed hard against the wound. Fingers firm, voice steady. Another asked his name. Adewale, he whispered. Whale. Someone said the bullet had missed his heart by inches. At the hospital, doctors worked quickly. The injury was serious but survivable. No major organs hit. No permanent loss of function predicted if infection didn't set in. Whale survived the night. By morning, the story had already escaped the walls of the store. Security footage circulated internally, then leaked. Eyewitness accounts spread online before official statements could catch up. Headlines formed fast, sharpened by context and history. A young black man, a convenience store, police involvement, a gunshot. Those four elements ignited something bigger than the incident itself. Within days, the story was everywhere. Local news led with it. National outlets followed. Social media filled the gaps with speculation, anger, and fear. Clips replayed again and again, slowed down, paused, analyzed frame by frame, by people who had never met Whale and never would. Protesters gathered outside the store, then outside the police station. Signs appeared with his name written in bold marker. Chants filled the air. Some people demanded justice. Others demanded arrests. Many believed the shooting was racially motivated, another example of force used too quickly, too harshly against a black suspect who posed no lethal threat. The officers involved were placed on administrative leave pending investigation. Their names were debated. Their pasts were dissected. Every prior arrest, every complaint, every rumor surfaced and spread. For weeks, the case dominated conversations. On television panels, experts argued over policy and perception. Some said the use of force was excessive. Others said the situation escalated unpredictably. Every side claimed certainty. None of them were lying in a hospital bed with cuffs on their wrists. Because even while recovering, Whale was under arrest. The charges came quietly compared to the noise outside. Theft, resisting detention. Additional counts added as prosecutors reviewed footage. He was transferred from the hospital to jail once doctors cleared him. The first night inside was worse than the pain. Jail doesn't care about headlines. It doesn't care about protests. It doesn't care about intentions. It reduces people to routines and rules and numbers written on wristbands. Whale lay awake listening to doors slam. Someone cried down the hall. Someone else laughed in a way that didn't sound human anymore. His arm throbbed. His thoughts raced. All he could think about was his mother. No one had explained where she was yet. Days passed. Lawyers visited. Social workers followed. Questions came from every direction, none of them gentle. Why didn't you seek assistance? Why didn't you accept placement? Why didn't you ask for help sooner? Each question felt like an accusation disguised as concern. The answer was always the same. I didn't want her alone. Eventually, the truth arrived without ceremony. While Whale lay in custody, decisions were made around him, evaluations conducted, paperwork filed. His mother was moved into a care facility, a safe one, a clean one, a necessary one, but not home. When he heard, something inside him collapsed quietly. Not anger, not shock, just exhaustion. Everything he had done, every sacrifice, every bad decision, every risk had been aimed at preventing that single outcome, and it happened anyway. The news coverage didn't stop right away. Protests continued for weeks. Some grew larger. Others faded as new stories replaced old outrage. Investigations concluded. Official statements were released. The officers were not charged. The conclusion cited threat perception, compliance issues, and policy guidelines. The decision satisfied no one completely. Some believed justice had failed. Others believed procedure had worked. Most people moved on. Whale did not. He pled guilty to the charges he could not fight. The sentence was measured. Time served counted. Rehabilitation programs were recommended. In court, he stood with his arms still healing, thinner than he'd been before, eyes fixed on the floor. He didn't speak much. There was nothing left to explain. From his cell, he learned how quickly a person can become a symbol, how a life can be flattened into headlines, arguments, and hashtags. Some people remembered him as a victim, some as a criminal, some as a cautionary tale. Very few remembered him as a son. He wrote letters to his mother. He wasn't sure she understood. He asked about her days. He told her he was sorry again. And again, though he couldn't say exactly for what anymore. When his release date came, there were no cameras waiting. The protests were long gone. The store reopened. The shelves were restocked. The footage faded from feeds and timelines. But Whale carried it with him. The pain in his arm lingered when the weather changed. The memory of the floor rushing up at him surfaced in quiet moments. The sound of his own voice begging stayed sharper than the sound of the gunshot. He survived. But survival, he learned, doesn't always mean victory. Sometimes it just means living with what's left. And somewhere in a care home not far away, his mother waited safe, cared for, and no longer home. That was the ending he never planned for. If you want more true stories told from the inside, from jail cells, from courtrooms, from moments no one forgets, subscribe for more episodes of From Within the Cell. Because some stories don't end at arrest. They begin there